Hey guys, what's up? Blaine Cooper. We're out at the Militia National Wildlife Refuge. We're making a stand there. It's peaceful. Nobody got hurt. There's no vandalism. There's no SWAT. Nobody's trying to kill anybody or anything like that. We're peaceful. We're trying to get this out in the open, and we had to do this because the corruption here with the BLM goes so deep. It goes beyond human reasoning. So this really needs to get national attention. And it's starting to get it now, so we can really get this out in the open. The special interest behind this is a lot of corruption, and it needs to be investigated. And we took this step in the stand to get this in the Wildlife National Refugee Center. And so they got a connection there, and how they're trying to, they've pushed out 100 ranchers since this thing started. So,
yeah.
You got anything, John?
Hold on 1 second, just one quick question, or two quick questions.
Oh, and hey, more Patriots,
listen,
come out, we could use you.
Couple of things have happened here when the group got separated yesterday. Okay, that literally, as far as putting you in jeopardy, you know, like my camera, I was on the outside.
Yeah.
As far as the media presence on the inside, right now your biggest concern, because you guys maintain a peaceful stance there.
Yep.
You want to do so.
A lot of us aren't even armed.
All the ranchers that have been pushed off the land.
Yep.
That wildlife reserve.
This needs to be exposed.
Right.
The FBI should investigate,
Okay.
because this is the corruption goes way too deep to ignore.
If you have the appropriate, truthful, independent media there telling your story, do you feel like you have the protection and everything will go peacefully?
Yeah, of course.
Do you feel like, are they going to come and physically retake their land here?
Absolutely. That's what perfectly we intend. Now, we understand that not all of them will be able to do so, but that is our intent. And those that are here already, that already have rights here, that are still here, that haven't been pushed off, we will protect them in asserting their rights and perfecting their rights. Okay, natural law dictates that for a right to exist, a person must claim them. They must use them, and they must defend them. And these folks here for many years have been without defense and have been pushed off. And we're here to help them. So we're here only to promote the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, and to help the people reestablish their rights.
Okay. Do you feel like the family that has sort of, you know, is at the front of this right now, the Hammonds, do you feel like they have disassociated themselves with you? They have publicly.
Okay.
Do you feel like the people, and more than the Hammonds, do you feel like people in this area are appreciative of you being here, or do you feel that they feel that they can handle their own land rights?
Well,
here?
they obviously haven't been able to handle their own land rights very well. The sentiment that we're finding is that most people simply live in fear here, and that we've been receiving great support from the people, thanking us for being here, appreciative that we're here, and we've had lots of visitors from, you know, other local ranchers and other local community, bringing in supplies, bringing in support. And I understand that that's not going to be 100%. The Hammonds are a grand example of the terrorism that the federal government is placing upon the people. Okay, you want to talk about terrorism? Terror is extreme fear. Terrorism is using extreme fear to control the situation. The federal government is operating terrorism upon the people of Harney County and many across the nation.
Those are strong words.
Those are strong words, and that is the truth. Okay, if the federal government will adhere to the Constitution of the United States, recognize the rights of the people, and let them live their lives in freedom, we wouldn't be here today.
Okay, and how about for, of course, the federal government side of this is that there's a lot of law breaking going on here.
Nope, no
Not
law
just with the
breaking
Hammonds, but also with, people that are here today.
Okay, let's talk about that law again. What is the law? The supreme law of the land. Okay, who's breaking that law? The federal government is. We're here to restore law, not break law.
Okay. And I asked a couple people this, but how long are you prepared to stay here, and what are you prepared to do?
Well, we're planning on staying here for a very long time, as long as needed to restore these rights. It may take months, it may take a couple years.
In possession of this refuge?
yeah, this is no longer going to be a refuge. It's going to be turned back to the people of Harney County. The refuge days are over.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to also make mention that, you know, the rights that we're trying to restore, all the rights, not just ranchers. You know, we got miners, you know, timber, recreation,
yeah,
you know, hunting, fishing, camping. The people are welcome. The people are welcome. They're welcome here now, and they're going to be welcome here for the future.
All right.
But the purpose of this is to return the resources of this land, of this county, back to the county, to the citizens of this state, and to this county in particular. And you know, you need to look at this constitutionally. And the federal government has no authority to own and control 1/3 of America's landmass. See, I'm a rancher down there in Mojave County. They control 90% of the land down there. And they have combined all three branches of power into one: legislative, executive, and judicial. And none of these people are accountable to us, the citizens there. They're not under the power of recall. And so they violate the letter and the intent of the Constitution by combining all three branches of power without representation. See, Harney County used to be the wealthiest county here in the state of Oregon. And now it is the poorest because the resources of Harney County have been seized by the federal government. We're here to allow the citizens of Harney County to reclaim their control of the resources of their county that they might once again farm, ranch from all these ranches. There was more than 100 ranchers out here that have been forced off. Terrorism is when the threat of force is used to create fear. And the people who have been terrorized in this county are the ranchers, the farmers that are threatened with their livelihood, have lost their livelihood. Look at the Ammon family being terrorized. So who is the terrorist? I think it's those that are terrorizing. We're not terrorizing anybody, we're threatening nobody. We mean harm to nobody. We're not being aggressive against anybody. And so you need to ask yourself, who are the terrorists? That would be silly for them to do something like that. These are just buildings. Nobody's being threatened, nobody's being harmed, and so for them to try to do something over some rock buildings, that would be completely silly.
Sure.
I have no intention of pointing a gun at anybody that's not pointing a gun at me. That's completely silly. But let's be friendly, let's be neighborly. Let's treat each other with some respect and civility.
Say, Pete.
What's up, man? Give me a hug. What's up, Kenny?
Oh, yeah, I hear there's FBI there that's coming out.
Huh?
I hear there's FBI there.
National Guard has been activated.
Oh, has he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, John Ritzheimer and Blaine Cooper here. We're in my truck right now. We're parked right outside the refuge here. Look, this place is swarmed with media. So pretty much all the way up to the gate here is pretty packed. There's still plenty of parking right here on the outside, so don't feel that you can't get in. There's no roadblocks, okay? All the rumors that are running rampant out there just need to be put to rest. We need you to get here and stand with us. That's what we need more than anything. That's what's going to prevent any bloodshed. The more people that get here, whether you're armed or unarmed, you get up here. Even if it's just to come and visit this historical site. This is going to be a historical site for this country. We don't want bloodshed. We all want to make it home to our families, and I believe they want that on the other side as well. Please get up here to help us. We're up here in Oregon.
We need your help, guys. Blaine Cooper and John Ritzheimer.
Thanks.
We're out.
They shut down the schools. They've heightened the situation.
Now, let me tell you why they shut down the schools, and you guys need to get this information out there as well. Let me share this with you guys. Listen up for 1 second. You ready? I'm gonna share this on the stream. I'm gonna relay this. The reason why they shut down the schools is because they've commandeered them to store freaking SWAT equipment. And I was told that by a firefighter here in town who said, dude, I agree with what you're doing. I just want to give you the heads up.
They have to have a place to put the teams. And
I already have locations. And he said, you may not want to go over there. Where's Ginger? Okay, good. He told me that, what's that? There's News 6. He told me that he actually gave me locations of schools. He's a firefighter and he knows about it. And he knows that he came to me and he pulled me aside. He said, dude, I know you're doing the right thing. I know exactly what's going on. I need to give you the heads up. They're getting ready to freaking barnstorm you guys. And the reason why they shut down the schools is because they're storing equipment in the schools. He told me this. He said you can go over and verify.
Just so everybody knows, any questions regarding numbers, anything security or OPSEC will not be answered.
Got out of here?
I'm not sure right now.
Again, want to thank everybody for being here, and this is an effort to reach out, to disclose. We do believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that the American people have a right to know what's going on.
It was -5 last night at 11 in town. Yeah, equipment just.
People to come. We need you to come because we need to be united and we need to have a strong defense. That's the way we can make sure that there is no lives that are lost here. We will not be aggressive. That will be something that we will not be. We are here to defend the people, and we will not take aggression.
Need your gaiters on, man. Snow will fall down top of those boots.
We felt that we'd give ourselves a name, at least so that we can be reported that way, and we could be more organized in that effort, and that would be Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. Our purpose, as we have shown, is to restore and defend the Constitution, that each person in this country can be protected by it, and that prosperity can continue. We love our country. We love the people in it. We will not forget about how important each person is, and how that person has the right to live here on this earth, and has the right to live in liberty, and has the right to own property, and to be able to reap the fruits of their labors. As many of you may know, this effort, if you will, started by understanding that a ranching family here in Harney County has been put under duress by multiple federal agencies. That those agencies have desired for many years to acquire their ranch, and that the Hammond family have refused to sell it because they want to pass on the ranching heritage to their children and to their grandchildren. And because of that refusal to sell their ranch, these federal agencies began an attack on this family. The Hammond family has experienced their private waters being fenced off by federal agencies even after the state of Oregon ruled that it was their waters. They have been restricted from their private property through the refuge here, going to their private properties through road closures and fences and gates, even after it was determined that the road was owned by the county of Harney. They have multiple times refused the purchase of it, and because of that have been prosecuted for actions that ranchers have done for over 100 years in this county and in this valley, and for protecting their private property. And these things are what this is about. That because we have allowed our federal government to step outside the bounds of the Constitution, they have come down upon the people and are prosecuting them now directly. They are coming down into the states and taking over the land and the resources, putting the people into duress, putting the people into poverty, and putting entire counties and entire states into undue obedience. I have asked that Shauna Cox read you what we have titled the Notice Redress of Grievance. And to give you a little background, we have spent several weeks, 2 months to be exact, in petitioning the state and the local county representatives to stand for the Hammonds against these unconstitutional actions. And we have done this through petitions. We have done this through contacts by emails. We know that the sheriff has received thousands of emails. We also know that the county representatives and the state representatives have received thousands of emails, and to no avail, that they have been ignored to the point where they have not even responded back at all. I myself, and along with many other organizations and influential people, have contacted these representatives and the county sheriff, asking them to get involved. And all we have been asking from the very beginning is that they put together an evidential hearing board to look at the evidences, look at the accusations that are set forth, and to look at the abuses that the Hammonds have been experiencing. And they have refused in every case. The Notice Redress of Grievance was our final attempt to get them to act. And this was a legal notice that was delivered to the county sheriff and the county representatives and state representatives. And I'm going to ask Shauna Cox if she'll read this.
Thanks, Ammon.
Who you're with and where you're from, please. Spell your name.
My name is Shauna Cox, S-H-A-W-N-A, last name Cox, C-O-X. And I am just an individual with a patriot American in support.
Step up to the mics.
Yes, sorry. The Notice Redress of Grievance. We the people, united individuals of these states united, Coalition of Western States, Pacific Patriot Network, Bundy Family and Supporters, Oregon Oath Keepers, the Idaho 3%, the Central Oregon Constitutional Guard, the Oregon Tactical, the Oregon Bearded Bastards, the Liberty Watch Washington, Nevada Committee for Full Statehood, Rural Heritage Preservation Project, Liberty for All, Continuous, there's more names that I don't have listed here. The Redress of Grievance says, notice to agent in notice to is notice to principal. Notice to principal is notice to agent. Sheriff David Ward, Commissioner Dan Nichols, Commissioner Pete Reynolds, Justice of the Peace Donna Thomas, District Attorney Tim Callahan, Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum, Governor Kate Brown. Dear sirs, after extensive research on the Hammond case, we, the people of these states united, have reason to believe that the Dwight and Stephen Hammond were not afforded their rights to due process as protected by the United States Constitution. We have principled evidence that Dwight and Stephen Hammond committed no crime in the act of performing the prescribed burn and backfire, that the U.S. government does not have authority to enforce territorial law under Article 4 within the state of Oregon, and that the county of Harney and state of Oregon failed to protect the Hammonds' rights as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, USC 42.1986, 18.242, 18.121, 42.1983, and 42.1985. We hold compelling evidence that the U.S. government abused the federal court system, situating the Hammond family into duress under an effort to force the Hammonds to sell their Steen Mountain property to a federal agency. We have substantial evidence that the U.S. Attorney's Office exploited an act of Congress imposing cruel and unusual punishment upon residents of Harney County. We hold substantial evidence that inside the borders of Harney County, the U.S. government is acting outside the authority enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. We secure evidence that the U.S. Attorney's Office independently prepared the indictment against Dwight and Stephen Hammond, and that the grand jury did not properly assemble or investigate before the indictment. We have no evidence that the grand jury participated in the indictment altogether. We have sure evidence that the U.S. Congress does not have authority to legislate minimum sentences requiring David and Stephen Hammond to serve 5 years in a federal penitentiary. We hold confirming video evidence of federal agents exhibiting a culture of intimidation toward individuals and businesses within the borders of Harney County, that federal agents by fire destroy private property, and that the Hammond family are being denied the same protection of the laws that are enjoyed by federal agents. We have supporting evidence that Judge Hogan controlled the narrative and did not allow full disclosure in the courtroom. We have additional evidence that Dwight and Stephen Hammond were sentenced for something different than what they were found guilty of. We hold sounding evidence that Dwight and Stephen Hammond are victims of cruel and unusual punishment, and that the U.S. Justice Department is violating the 8th Amendment. We hold sure evidence that Dwight and Stephen Hammond are being subject for the same offense twice put in jeopardy, including that the 9th Circuit District Court of Appeals is in violation of the 5th Amendment. We have obtained appalling evidence but that the U.S. Attorney's Office threatened the Hammond family with early detention and further punishment if the Hammond family continued to communicate with a certain individual. This evidence foundationally speaks against the U.S. Attorney's Office in their gross effort to infringe upon the Hammond's rights to free exercise of speech, the First Amendment, U.S. Constitution 18.242. In a commitment to expose the truth and administrate justice, we, the people of these states united, insist that you immediately assemble an independent evidential hearing board call witnesses and investigate each of these allegations publicly. That Harney County Board of Commissions and the Sheriff's Department enforce the conclusions of the evidential hearing board in support of the United States Constitution. We further insist that the Hammond family be protected from reporting to federal prison until all allegations can be determined. We need not remind you of your lawful duty to act on these matters as insisted, or nor of the consequences if you knowingly neglected your duty. USC 18-2382, 18-2071, 18-2076, 42-1983, 42-1985, 42-1986. In light of the information presented, we require your thoughtful response within 5 days of the date of this notice. If we do not receive your response within 5 days, we will have no choice but to understand that you do not wish to do your duty and are content in acting in negligence to your obligation to defend the rights and liberties of the people. Therefore, govern yourselves accordingly, respectfully. We, the people, united individuals of these states united. We had tens of thousands of people put their names to this across the United States and including Hawaii, all 50 states. Thank you.
As you may know, Dwight and Stephen Hammond are being forced to report to prison today for a crime they did not commit, and they've been put twice in jeopardy for. They've already served prison time for this already, and now they're being forced to go back again. They are a good ranching family that ranches not but just a few miles from here. And myself and many, many, many others for weeks on end put all the energy we possibly could to try to keep them from having to go into this prison. And we feel that we have exhausted all prudent measures and have been ignored. And it has been left to us to decide whether we allow these things to go on or whether we make a stand so they will not happen to other people across this country, so they will not come into our homes and take away our rights, and they will not come into our children's home and take away their rights. And I have a request for the media, and that is to do what our elected representatives would not do, to look into the Hammond case, to find out that the Hammonds did not commit the crimes that they are accused of, and to find that the Hammonds have been, their human rights have been violated in many ways, and seek for justice in these matters. With that, I'll turn the time over to LaVoy Finicum for a few words, and I thank you for your time.
Mr. Bundy, before you do that, can we ask you whether you've got the support of the Hammond?
He'll answer other questions in a minute. He asked me to just make a few comments. LaVoy Finicum, and I'm a rancher, L-A, capital V-O-Y, F-I-N-I-C-U-M. I'm a rancher in northern Arizona. I'm here to support the Hammonds. There's been a lot of words that have been said here. I see some eyes that started to kind of glaze over a little bit. Maybe I can bring it down to a little more emotional level or a human level. Each one of you here today are important. Individually, each one of you are important. Not collectively, we're talking about you as an individual, as a human being. The Hammond family are human beings. They're individuals. They have loved ones. They have children, grandchildren. You know, this is real. This affects real lives. And so that's why we're here today. And if our federal government would have abided by the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we would have never have gotten here. And so let me just kind of come to a simple level of why this is so bad at the federal level. Our founding fathers had escaped from tyranny. They believed in freedom. And so when they set up our government, they separated the powers, didn't they? And we all know what they are: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We know those three branches of power. Well, what has happened to 1/3 of our landmass? Do you know the federal government owns and controls 1/3 of this nation? Let me put that in perspective. You need to put in the country of Germany, and put in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and better throw in Great Britain too, and then you're getting about the same landmass as what the federal government says that they own and control. And they say they have complete legislative power whatsoever. They have taken it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has upheld it. Yes, they have complete power whatsoever over 1/3 of this nation. Now, let me explain it simply as I can, as I try to stumble over my words here, is that for myself as a rancher, my ranch is in northern Arizona, a bureaucrat behind the desk can write a statute regarding me, my ranch. It has the force and effect of law. This bureaucrat is not accountable to me. We have not elected him there. Now, if I get contrary to that statute, there's a federal ranger with a gun that can enforce that. And if it goes from there, I am brought into a federal court. Neither the law enforcement, the federal ranger, has been elected by us, the people here. They are not under the power of the recall. Neither the bureaucrat that wrote the statute, neither the law enforcement that enforces it, and now I am hauled into a federal court. All three branches of power under one head with no representation. Did we not, as Americans, face this issue some 200 years ago? Don't we remember that phrase? Taxation without representation. So now here we are, control without representation. 1/3 of our landmass. It's an empire within our own country. Unaccountable, unelected. The real power is in the bureaucracies. And so that's kind of the simple part of it. You know, it's about family. It's about my family. It's about the Hammond family. I've spoken to many ranchers in Utah, in Nevada, in Arizona. They are all feeling the same thing. They're all feeling this oppression that is coming down upon them.
Their livelihood is threatened, being taken away. Their ranchers are being regulated out of business. And so this is real. These families are real. They're not trying to cause problems. They're food producers. They help make our country self-reliant, free, independent. Do you realize that you have to go back to about 1955 to get as low as a mother head count as we have right now in the United States? Have any of you ate a steak lately? Do you know the price of that? That goes way up. You know, if we had more demand, if we had more production, we would ship out more, we would feed more, we would be self-reliant as a country. These are good people. They produce, they add to our country. They do not take it away. I want to say one more thing about here, what we're doing. Every one of you that says this is an occupation until their demands are met, you misunderstand. We're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're here to work. These buildings here belong to Harney County. These are Harney County public lands, the state of Oregon. This is theirs. This is their land. This is their state. It's theirs. And so we've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work. We're going to try to help restore these ranchers that have lost their ranches back to them. We're going to legally go to the records. We're going to search out these ranchers. Over 100 ranchers have lost their ranches here in this very area, in this very county, have been pushed off. We would like to see them return to their ranches, ranch again, log again, live again as free people. And so we're here to try to help that happen. We're going to go to work. We're not going to just sit down here and twiddle our thumbs. We've got a lot to do, and I appreciate you being here. I'm just a simple hick, and doing the best I can. And I love this country. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my family. And if we lose freedom, what shall they do? I want my children to experience real freedom, breathe free air, and I thank you.
Mr. Bundy, you have time for any questions?
I'll answer a few questions.
What do you make of it that there hasn't been law enforcement here? Have they been in touch with you?
Indirectly.
They've been indirectly in touch?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means that they have reached out to individuals that we are closely affiliated with and have give messages to us.
What are those messages?
That they intend not to come upon us.
Have you heard anything from the Ammon family in regards to your statements here about them today?
Well, I just made them, so no.
Well, I mean, did you contact them in advance of the statements to see where they feel about you?
My relationship to the Hammonds has been about 8 weeks ago. I came to Burns and I met with them many times in their homes. I watched them in tears multiple times as a 74-year-old man covers his head and cries and asks, how can this happen to another individual? I love the Hammonds. I can sympathize with them. I could empathize with them. And they were afraid that after the threats came from them for speaking to me, they did pull back and have continued communications through, should we say, alternative ways. But I have not spoken to them in several days.
How long
this evidentiary board to be created?
And have you, in a sense, already made the statement?
Excuse me?
How long do you plan to be here? And have you, in a sense, already made a statement?
We definitely have made a statement, but statements are not good enough. We intend on going to work and assisting the people of Harney County in claiming their rights, using their rights as free people.
More details on going to work. What does that mean, going to work?
Well, we have a lot of work to be able to unwind the unconstitutional land transactions that have taken place here. We also have a lot of work to unwind the claims that the federal government has upon this land. And we have teams that are going to be doing that. We have very specific plans that we are going to take place. And we have a defense mechanism that allows us to do this while we are here.
What about you work in the center down there? I assume that there were employees at this wildlife refuge. Are they going to be part
We haven't been in contact with any of them.
So you're saying essentially...
I would say go to the Constitution, take the time to study it, and find out what is lawful and what is not.
Is there anything that would make you say, okay, we can end this and go home now?
I wouldn't say words would do it. I would say action would. And that would be for the federal government to remove its unconstitutional presence here in the county.
So you want the federal government to give up this wildlife refuge, give it back to ranchers? Is that the demand?
I want the federal government to abide by the Constitution of the United States.
Does the Constitution of the United States not allow, I'm sorry, I haven't studied that.
No, go ahead.
It does not allow for federal land of any kind?
It does allow for federal land of any kind, but it has to be seeded properly. They have to get permission from the state legislatures. They have to purchase that land, and they can only use it for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. And wildlife refuges do not fall within those enumerated authorized lands.
So would this be a first step, and you'd like to see other federal wildlife refuges liberated as well?
That's up to the county.
Yeah, that's up to the state and the counties, what they would do with those refugees.
What you propose for anybody who is from the county who's with you and down there and saying they're also not going to leave?
No, not with us here, they're staying, because their homes are much more comfortable than that.
If the authorities tried to remove you forcibly, how far are you willing to take this in the defense of your cause?
We do not believe that they will do that.
What if they do?
Yes. Excuse me? No, they are not. But we welcome them here, absolutely.
How many of Obama administration looking into gun control, do you think?
Okay, one more question.
Some of our listeners say that if this had happened at a federal building in downtown Denver, the feds would have gone in guns blazing 24 hours ago. Why are you different?
One is we're based on constitutional principles. We know that we're right, and we chose a facility that was not downtown. Thank you.
How many are you, sir? How many of you are here? If you want us to be factual, tell us how many there are.
All right, 3 days in and no signs of giving up. The son of infamous illegal rancher Cliven Bundy is now making a name for himself this new year. Ammon Bundy is leading that takeover of a government building at a wildlife refuge in Oregon. So far, it's been peaceful, but Bundy and his group are armed and mince no words about it. They say that they're not going anywhere. So joining me now to continue the occupation in Oregon talk is Emmy award-winning legal and media analyst Lionel of Lionel Media. Lionel, Happy New Year, my friend. Good to see you.
Same to you.
Now, let's talk legality of this stunt from Ammon Bundy. It would appear that the Bundys don't like the rules surrounding the federal government and the assets they have. The younger Bundy, he's claiming that he's fighting against things like eminent domain. Does he actually have a leg to stand on here, though?
Well, first of all, you have Ammon, and then you have Ryan and Cliven. I don't know where Cliven is. And let me give you a couple of hints. You know how you can tell somebody doesn't know anything about the Constitution? When they hold up the Constitution. Except for me. When they go like this, the Constitution is like the Bible and Ayn Rand. Nobody's read it. So all of a sudden, Jethro and a bunch of yokels decide that they're going to interpret the Constitution. And they've looked at Article 1 and others, and what they're saying is, well, if something is not in the Constitution itself, if something is not there using a strict constructionist attitude, then therefore it doesn't exist. Let me tell you a couple of things. There's nothing in the Constitution about congressional districts, or the exclusionary rule, or marriage, or the separation of church and state, or the Air Force, or the number of Supreme Court justices. What you're seeing right now is this confused and muddled exercise of something that, by the way, is playing into the hands of the very people who are trying to restrict firearms which apparently is against this particular group. And what they're doing is, if I didn't know better, and I'm not suggesting this, but if I didn't know better, I would swear these were plants by the administration to make everybody decry this notion of a militia. They're not a militia. I don't know what this is.
You wouldn't call them a militia? Hold it right there, though. They are armed to the teeth, Lionel. They make no qualms about it. They're armed to the teeth. A lot of people are criticizing, saying that the lack of police presence or the lack of FBI presence where these armed men have taken over a government building, is it because they're white, that there no armed forces are showing up? Meanwhile, POTUS is on his gun control tour now on his final year in office. Does this all mesh together, in your opinion?
Manila, it's 20 questions you just gave me. What are you doing to me? It's the first part of the year. First and foremost, number one, the Capone mob had guns. That didn't make them a militia. Look, there are people in this country, myself included, who believe in rational Second Amendment rights, who believe that people like this are actually doing more to harm the rights of rational, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who don't want to take over anything. Look, this started when the Hammonds were sentenced to a 5-year minimum mandatory by a federal judge. It went an appeal, it came back. The Hammonds, the subject of this, are saying, whoa, wait a minute, don't include us in this. Cliven Bundy is saying, whoa, wait a minute. What this is this is apparently a mosh pit of celebrity-seeking people, this maundered, confused sense of constitutional rights and privilege. But you bring up a good point. A lot of folks are saying, look what happens when you have a bunch of people who are well armed. There's no action against this. There's no 82nd Airborne. Where's all this 1033 stuff that we talk about? The MRAPs and the militarized police. A lot of people are saying, you know, there's something to be said for this. No, but apparently they've won.
They are being treated certainly a lot differently than anybody else that would be armed anywhere else in the country. We got to leave that right there, Lionel. Thank you so much for that. Enlightening as usual. That was legal and media analyst Lionel of Lionel Media.
The presidential overreach. The overreach of this administration and our government knows apparently no bounds. From illegal immigration to gun rights, even government land grabs like the one being attempted, it appears, in Oregon. And the overreach of agencies, including the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Land Management, the Environmental Protection Agency, overreach that extends to the politicized Obama Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's offices around the country. The spreading arrogance and abuse of power is at the heart of what we are witnessing in Oregon, as this administration has trampled the constitutional rights of the Hammond family. Our national media is ideologically aligned, of course, with this administration. So aligned that they don't even ask why neither authorities or citizens in Oregon have the guts to demand fair treatment by the very federal government that should be serving them, not persecuting them. These are dangerous times, my friends, made all the more dangerous by citizens so intimidated by our federal government they will neither speak out nor act to demand their rights and to protect the rights of their fellow citizens.
Ammon Bundy, one of the leaders of the Standoff. The group is now calling itself Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. Ammon, thank you very much for being here tonight. So how is what you are doing not lawlessness?
Well, I think that we have to go to the supreme law of the land to answer that question. And that is that the federal government does not have authority to come down into the states and to control its land and resources. That is for the people to do, and that is clearly stated in Article 1:817 of the Constitution.
But you know the argument on the other side, which is these ranchers, whom you support, but you're not directly involved, had their day in court, and they were found guilty, and it went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which denied their appeal. Isn't that the way it's supposed to work in our country when it comes to the rule of law?
Yeah, well, let me ask you, and I'm sure you know the answer, but who was the plaintiff?
Keep going.
No, I'm asking, who was the plaintiff against the Hammonds?
I'm waiting for you to make your point. Generally, I don't answer the questions on my show. I ask them.
Oh. Well, I mean, it was asked, intended to be answered, but the plaintiff is the federal government. And yet, they're also, the prosecutors are the federal government. And those who want their land is the federal government. And those agencies that have been oppressing the people here are the federal government. There is no proper redress because the design of this structure of this government is not intended for the federal government to come down against individuals in a state on these matters, and that is what this is all about.
Your brother Ryan apparently told the Oregonian, Ian, I think it's Colgren of the Oregonian, that you are willing to kill and be killed if necessary here. Do you agree with that?
That statement was taken way out of context. I've already talked to my brother about that, and no, I wouldn't agree with it because it wasn't his statement.
So you disavow that. You will not let this come to violence.
Well, I have a family. I have 6 children, a beautiful wife. I have a wonderful home. I have a business, several employees. I'm not here to die. I'm here to defend my freedoms and my liberties. And will I? Yes. But it's not going to come to that. There's good things that are going to come from this, and things are going to get straightened out. And that's what we're here, and we're confident that that is going to happen. And it'll be a benefit for many people across this nation. And I can pass a lot of what I've enjoyed in this life onto my children.
Well, Mr. Bundy, thank you for being with us tonight with your perspective.
Thank you.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I'm sure my colleagues are aware of the situation in Harney County, Oregon, where a group of protesters, armed, have overtaken a federal facility, the National Wildlife Refuge. This group is led largely by people who are not necessarily from Oregon, although they obviously have supporters from Oregon. They are originally there to protest the sentencing of Dwight and Steve Hammond. I know the Hammonds. I've known them for probably close to 20 years. They're longtime responsible ranchers in Harney County. They have been sentenced to prison, not once, but now twice, and I'll get into that in a moment. But the point I want to make at the outset here is for people in this chamber to understand what drives people to do what's happening tonight in Harney County. I've had the great honor and privilege to represent Harney County for a number of years. I have seen the impact of federal policies from the Clinton administration to the Obama administration. I have seen what happens when overzealous bureaucrats and agencies go beyond the law and clamp down on people. I have seen what courts have done. And I have seen the time for Congress to act, and then it has not. I want to put this in perspective because I think it's really important to understand how big this region is. My congressional district in Oregon is something like the 7th or 8th biggest in the Congress by size. If you overlaid it over the East Coast, it would start in the Atlantic and end in Ohio. The county where this occupation is taking place, Harney County, is over 10,000 square miles, and there are 7,000 souls inhabiting it. If my math is right, that's one person for every 1.4 miles. One person for every 1.4 miles. It's 10 times the size of Rhode Island, just this one county. It's larger than the state of Maryland, and 72% of it is under the command and control of the federal government. It is the public's land. That is true. But what people don't understand is the culture, the lifestyle of this great American West, and how much these ranchers care about the environment, about the future, about their children, about America, and how much they believe in the Constitution. And now we see the extent they will go to defend what they view as their constitutional rights. Now, I am not defending armed takeovers. I do not think that's appropriate, and I think the time has come for those to consider that they've made their case in the public about what is happening in the West, and perhaps it's time for them to realize they've made their case and to go home. But I want to talk about what happened with the Hammonds. And I want to put in perspective of what happens almost every year, and that is these enormous wildfires. The Miller Homestead wildfire in 2012 burned 160,000 acres, mostly in this county, if not all, 250 square miles, quarter the size of the state of Rhode Island. That was just in 2012. The Berry Point fire that year in Lake County next door burned 93,000 acres. Last summer alone, we burned 799,974 acres across Oregon. That's both forest and high desert. 2012, 3.4 million acres burned in Oregon. There was another fire in Malheur County, the Long Draw fire in 2012 burned 557,000 acres, 5 times the size of Rhode Island. So 93,000 acres, 557,000 acres, 160,000 acres, all burning. The Hammonds are in prison tonight for setting a backfire that they admit to that burned 139 acres. And they will sit in prison, time served and time going forward, 5 years. Under a law that I would argue was never intended to mete out that kind of punishment. And I'll get that to a moment. I've told you I worked with the Hammonds and many ranchers in Harney County. In the last years of the Clinton administration, despite their own agency's reviews and analysis, Bill Clinton threatened to create a giant monument on Steens Mountain. And when Secretary Babbitt, Interior Secretary at the time, came before the House Resources Committee, of which I was a member, I said, Mr. Secretary, your own resource advisory committees in the area just reported that there was no need for additional protection on Steens Mountain, and yet you and the President are threatening this national monument. Why do you waste the time of the citizens to go through a process to determine if additional protections are needed and then ignore what they came up with? To Bruce Babbitt's credit, he agreed when I told him I think you'd be surprised about what the local ranchers and citizens of Harney County would be willing to do if you gave them a chance. To his credit, he said, all right, I will give them that chance. And he did. We went to work on legislation. It took a full year. I worked with the Hammonds. I worked with Stacey Davies. I worked with all kinds of folks, put a staffer on it full time, multiple staffs, and we worked with the environmental community and others. And we created the Steens Mountain Cooperative Management and Protection Act. Model legislation, never been done before, because I said we don't have to live by past laws, we write laws. So we wrote a new law to create a cooperative spirit of management in Harney County. Hammonds were part of that discussion. They say we saved a running camp that Harlan Wyardi runs. We protected inholder. We tried to do all the right things and create the kind of partnership and cooperation that the federal government and the citizens should have. Let me fast forward on that particular law. Not long after that became law, and it was heralded as this monumental law of great significance, a new era in cooperation and spirit of cooperation. Some of those involved on the other side and some of the agencies decided to reinterpret it. And the first thing they tried to do is shut down this kids' running camp because they said, well, too many, maybe more than 20, run down this canyon back up, as they had for many, many years. So they wanted to shut it down. So we had to fight them back, said, no, the law says historical standards. Then the bureaucrats, because we said you should have your historical access to your property, if you're up on Steens Mountain, you should maintain that access like you've always had it. Do you know what the bureaucrats said? They began to solicit from the inn holders in this area. How many times did you go up there last year? You see, they wanted to put a noose around the neck of those who were inside. That was a total violation of what we intended, and we had to back them off. See, the bureaucracy wants to interpret the laws we write in ways they want. And in this case, they were wrong. Not once, but twice. And then a couple years ago, I learned that despite the fact we created the first cow-free wilderness in the United States under this law, and said clearly in this law that it would be the responsibility of the government to put up fencing to keep the cows out as part of the agreement, the Bureau of Land Management said, no, we're not going to follow that law. And they told a rancher they had to build a fence. I networked with my Democrat colleague, Mr. DeFazio from Oregon, who was part of writing this law. I said, Peter, you remember that, right? He said, yeah, I didn't like it, but that was the case. BLM still wouldn't listen. So we continued to push it. And they argued back. Well, it turns out there had been a second rancher who brought this to my attention, who they were telling had to do the same thing, build the fence, when the government was supposed to, under the law I wrote. The agency, the arrogance of the agency was such that they said, we don't agree with you. Now, there aren't many times, Mr. Speaker, in this job when you can say, I know what the intent of a law was, but in this case I could because I wrote the law. I knew the intent. Oh, that wasn't good enough. No. The arrogance of these agency people was such that we had to go to the archives and drag out the boxes from 99, 2000, when we wrote this law, from the hearings that had all the records for the hearings and the floor discussion, to talk about the intent. And our retired member, George Miller, actually, we used some of his information where he said the government would provide the fencing. They were still reluctant to follow it. So I put language in the appropriations bill that restated the federal law. Do you understand how frustrated I am at this? Can you imagine how the people on the ground feel? Can you imagine? If you're not there, you can't. If you're not there, you can't. You ridicule them. Yeah, Portland Oregonians running a thing. What do you send them, meals for militia? Let's have fun with this. This is not a laughing matter from any consequence. Nobody's going to win out of this thing. This is a government that has gone too far for too long. Now, I'm not condoning this takeover in any way. I want to make that clear. I don't think it's appropriate. There's a right to protest. I think they've gone too far. But I understand and hear their anger. Right now, this administration, secretly, but not so much, is threatening in the next county over, that looks a lot like this one, Malheur County, to force a monument of 2.5 million acres, we believe. I think this is outrageous. It flies in face of the people and the way of life and the public access. There's a company, Keen Shoes. It already has a big marketing campaign. This is about selling shoes, for God's sakes. I call on the president, if he wants to help reduce the tension that's out there, to walk away from this. And if he doesn't want to walk away and say, no, we're not going to do that, to help us bring down this level of frustration and anger, then at least be honest, or his Secretary of Interior needs to be honest with us and tell us they are going to do it. Either they are or they aren't. But all they are is being coy. That feeds into this. It feeds into the anger that I feel. It feeds into the anger out there. So the president should say, I'm not going to do a national monument. I'm not going to add more fuel on this fire in the West. We've fought other issues. More than half of my district is under federal management, or lack thereof. They've come out with these proposals to close roads into the forests. They've ignored public input. They often claim to have all these open meetings and listen to the public, and then, in the case of Wallowa Whitman, the forest supervisor, who was eventually relieved because of this, I believe, completely ignored all the meetings, all the input, all the work of the counties and the local people, and said, forget it, I'm going my own direction. There were 900 people turned out at the National Guard Armory where they had a public hearing, standing room only and beyond, furious. You see, how do you have faith in a government that doesn't ever listen to you? How do you have faith in a government that when elected representatives write a law, those charged with the responsibility of implementing it choose to go the other direction and not do so? That is what's breaking faith between the American people and their government. And that's what has to change. The other thing that has to change is the law under which the Hammonds were sentenced. Now, they probably did some things that weren't legal. I've given you the size of the acreages that burn naturally. I haven't gotten into the discussion about how these fires are often fought and how the federal government frequently will go on private land and set a fire without permission to back burn. That happens all the time. In fact, in the Berry Point fire down in Lake County, they set fire on private timberland as a back burn while the owners of the property were putting out spot fires down in the canyon. I drove down there afterwards. They're darn lucky to have come out alive. There's nobody sentenced under the Terrorism Act there. Oh, heck no. It's the government. They weren't sentenced. Nobody was charged. Oh, it just happened. Now, fires are tough to fight. I have great respect for firefighters. There are always two sides on how these fires get fought, but I can tell you a few years back in Harney County, because I went and held a meeting out there right as the fire was being put out, that the fire crews came in, went on private ground, lit a backfire on private ground behind a fence line that then burned out the farmer's fence, the rancher's fence, and burned all the way over and down into a canyon where there was a wetland, which would have been the natural break to stop the fire from the other side. You see, they never needed to burn that land. These things happen in the course of fighting fire. Doesn't mean they're right, but rare is it that somebody ends up 5 years in prison. Let me tell you what the senior judge said when he sentenced the Hammonds the first time. Judge Michael Hogan, senior federal judge, highly respected in Oregon. He sentenced Dwight Hammond to 3 months, to a year. There were different offenses here. And he said, I am not going to apply the mandatory minimum, and because to me, to do so under the 8th Amendment would result in a sentence which is grossly disproportionate to the severity of the offenses here. The judge went on to say, and with regard to the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, this sort of conduct would not have been conduct intended under the statute. When you ask, what if you burn sagebrush in the suburbs of Los Angeles and their homes up the ravines, it might apply. Out in the wilderness here, I don't think that's what the Congress intended. And in addition, it just would not meet any idea I have of justice proportionality. It would be a sentence which would shock the conscience to me. Close quote. Senior Judge Mike Hogan, when he did the original sentencing. But you see, under this 1996 law, under which they were charged and convicted, it turns out he had no judicial leeway. He could not mete out a sentence that was proportionate to what the crime was. So, yesterday, Dwight and Steve went to prison again. Dwight will be 79 when he gets out. Steve will be about 50. Meanwhile, Harney County on the ranch, Susie will continue to try and survive. 6,000-acre ranch. She needs grazing permits to make this happen. It would be a cruel and unjust act, by the way, if access to those grazing permits that allow them to work were not extended. What possible good could come out of bankrupting a grandmother who's trying to keep a ranch together? Her husband sits in prison, her son sits in prison. What possible good? They'll serve their sentences. There's nothing short of clemency that the president only can offer that we can do. But we can change that law, and we should, so that nobody ever is locked in like that is for a situation like this where a senior judge literally on his final day on the bench said this goes too far, goes too far. They appealed that, by the way, and lost, but I believe the judge was right. We have to listen to the people. We have to understand why events like this are taking place in our communities. They're taking place in cities. We've witnessed that. And we try and get our heads around it. There are more people from the cities, so there are more members from the cities. There aren't many of us that represent these vast, wide open, incredibly beautiful, harsh districts like the one I do. And the people there love the land. It was the ranchers who came up with the concept of the cooperative management. It was the ranchers who love Stevens Mountain and know that for them to survive, they have to take care of the range. They're good people. Their sons and daughters, by a higher proportion, fight in our wars. And die. And I've been to their funerals. So to my friends across Eastern Oregon, I will always fight for you. But we have to understand there's a time and a way. Hopefully the country, through this, understands we have a real problem in America. How we manage our lands and how we're losing them. It's not like we haven't tried here, Mr. Speaker. Year after year, we've passed bipartisan legislation to provide more active management on our forests so we don't lose them all to fire, and we're losing them all to fire. And we're losing firefighters' lives, homes, watersheds, great resources of the West. Teddy Roosevelt would roll over in his grave. You know, he created this wildlife refuge in 1908. There were some bad actors there in the 80s, by the way, that were very aggressive running the refuge, basically threatening eminent domain and other things that took ranches. It was bad. And that lasted for at least a decade or more. It's gotten better, though. It's not perfect. But there's a much better relationship, and the refuge and the ranchers work closer together. And in fact, during this fire in 2012, Refuge actually opened itself up to the ranchers for hay and feed because theirs was burned out because of this big fire. So there was a better spirit there, but there's still these problems. The threat of waters of the U.S. shutting down stock ponds and irrigation canals and a way of life. The threat of fire every year that seems to not be battled right and just gets away. And no one's really held accountable. The continued restriction on the lives of the men and women who, for generations, have worked hard in a tough environment. It's just gone too far. It's hurtful. And I hope people understand how serious this is felt and how heartfelt this is by those who pay their taxes and try and live by the law and do the right things, and how oppressed they feel by the government that they elect and the government they certainly don't elect, and how much they will always defend the flag and the country, and their sons and daughters will go to war, and some will not come back, and they have not from this area. There's a better solution here. The President needs to back off on the monument. The BLM needs to make sure Susie Hammond isn't pushed into bankruptcy and then her ranch taken by the government and added to those that have been. And we need to be better at hearing people from all walks of life and all regions of our country and understanding this anger that's out there and what we can do to bring about correct change and peaceful resolution. It's not too late. We can do this. It's a great country. We have the processes to do it right. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.